Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and this time we're going to be talking about some ridiculous fan review bombs for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on Metacritic. But before we jump to things, there's a couple of things I want to briefly mention. First, we are now aiming to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and we'll see what happens as the year progresses. Now, something else I want to talk about is that on OpenCritic, the other big sort of site that collects all these different critical reviews, has The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom at a 97 and is currently ranked above all other games in history that it has compiled. Now, they don't have as many critics on their site. They also haven't been around for as long, or at least they don't have as long of a history, but it's still been going on for quite a long time, and on this site, Tears of the Kingdom is above all major modern games, even including the likes of Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. So it's pretty darn good, and Tears of the Kingdom being a 96 on Metacritic still has it as one of the highest reviewed games of all time. Even though Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey are a 97 on that site, it's still extremely good. And the reason for this isn't because there is like this incredible bias for Zelda, or people are lying, or they're being paid off. No, the game is that good. The Zelda team, which historically has been one of the greatest development teams in history, worked on this game for years, half a decade, if not more, and they were building off a game that they were also working for about half a decade. So there's a lot of work being put into this. It's definitely a big deal. It's definitely a high quality product. Is it for you necessarily? Maybe not for you, but it probably is for most people because it's a pretty darn good game. But some people just can't handle that. Some people just can't believe it. So what do some people do? They take to review bombing where they can. So on Metacritic, you can just go and put your own review score of the game, even if you don't have the game, even if you haven't played the game, and you can just put your opinion out there and just straight up lie and mislead people. And so that's why I'm kind of making this video, because maybe some of you are out there and you're wondering, oh, are any of these things true? They're not, and I'll kind of get into it. Here we have honest reviews. They gave the game a 2 out of 10. Another boring Assassin's Creed clone. These types of games were already outdated 3 years ago. Thankfully, it won't win Game of the Year because even Zelda fans are saying that it's not that good. Also, there have already been better games in 2023. Well, they gave the game a 2 out of 10, so, you know, look at them. They were being nice. There's nothing here that is of value, I think. It's pretty ridiculous. Zelda fans? Which Zelda fans? Because I'm a Zelda fan, and it is that good, at least from what I've played so far. And I don't know if there's been better games in 2023, at least according to OpenCritic and Metacritic, that is definitely not the case. But of course, maybe some people just don't believe that the review scores are honest. So here we have Da Fuzz. They gave the game a 1 out of 10. Terrible game. It is literally Breath of the Wild version 1.5, but with a few new cutscenes, a lamer story, and magic to glue items together. This is not Zelda anymore. This is ZeldaCraft. It doesn't even have any real dungeons, which were a mainstay of the series since day one. P.S. Metacritic is manipulating the score by deleting negative ratings left and right. At this point, they might as well rename the site Positive Rating for Nintendo Only. I don't agree. So there is something to the idea of ZeldaCraft, because with Ultra Hand, there's a lot of building mechanics. There's a lot there that you can customize and work with. So referring to this as a ZeldaCraft, it isn't inaccurate, actually. I think that part has some legitimacy. But I don't think it's fair to call this game a Breath of the Wild 1.5, because there's a lot more than 0.5 of content here, for sure. Just a few new cutscenes, it's more than a few, but that's a subjective thing. A lamer story and magic to glue items together, okay. But when you say lamer story, like that's a hot take and a half. It's one thing to argue that you're not a big fan of the story in Tears of the Kingdom, but it's another to say that the story is worse than Breath of the Wild. I think most will agree that the story, or at least the manner of delivery of the story in Tears of the Kingdom, and the voice acting and just how everything's been put together, is straight up, objectively better than what they did in Breath of the Wild. So to say lamer, not really true at all. And saying that Metacritic is manipulating scores, it is an aggregation, but to make this argument that it's somehow bought off or that this is just only positive ratings for Nintendo, that's just not true. There have been times where there have been other games from other companies that have had better reviews than Nintendo. That's happened. I think back to when God of War won some Game of the Year awards, for example. And that's no slight against God of War. It's an amazing game. It deserved the great reviews. This is just someone who can't agree on something that they don't like for whatever reason. It's totally biased and not fair in any way at all. Here we have Bahamut XD with a 4 out of 10. That's higher than some of the other scores we've read. They took 6 years to develop a game that is pretty much Breath of the Wild with changes. Same gameplay, same core mechanics, same engine, same graphics, almost the same map too. I bet they just took the original file and made changes on top of it. Sorry, but for a $70 game from a AAA company from such an IP, that is just not acceptable. Releasing a game on 2023 that dips to 20 frames per second and can't barely hold 30 is just unacceptable, no matter if it's a hardware issue and not the actual game. The experience is getting ruined by the hardware. After reading this, I get the sense that this person is not happy that this game is on Switch. They probably want to play it on a system that's more powerful. And to that I'll say that, yeah, the Switch is dated hardware, but it's also still pretty impressive for what Switch standards are. And outside of Switch standards, I still think the game is visually pleasing. I am not really taking any serious issues with the game's visuals. I have noticed some pop-in, which, okay, that's gonna exist, but otherwise, I'm okay with the game. The frame rate issues, there were reported frame rate problems from the preview event, but now that the game is out, before the game even came out, they patched it before release, and the game runs better now. I haven't noticed any substantial frame rate drops. The game is just fine. It's at least like Breath of the Wild, if not a little bit better. And from a graphics perspective, from visuals, the lighting is better, the shadows are better, the textures are better, there's more on screen, there's more density. You can see further off into the distance. The world is just straight up larger. You can jump from the top of the sky and dive not just straight down to the surface seamlessly, but from the sky past the surface to the very depths, totally seamlessly with no slowdown at all. That's ridiculous. That is a technical achievement. It is impressive. This game is very polished. There aren't glitches or anything like that. This game is more polished than pretty much any other open world game ever. You'll be hard pressed to find a glitch. It may be possible, like with any game, but they definitely put the work in on this one to make sure it's worth its price. But let's speak on that for a brief moment, because I do recognize that maybe not everyone's okay with spending $70, and I do think there is something to that maybe more people can find agreeable. Most Switch games, when they were full price, were $60 across the board, regardless of budget, regardless of size. And with Tears of the Kingdom, it is Nintendo's biggest game yet. So pricing it at $70, considering that it costs them more to make, it's a bigger game, there's more content there, you can argue is fair, but you could also argue that beforehand, regardless of size or budget, most big games were $60. So that is a bit of a change. And honestly, I think it is Nintendo sort of positioning things so that when we move on to next generation, there can be more expensive games. They figured that if there's any game that they could do this with and get away with it, it would be Tears of the Kingdom. And that's what they've done, but it's worth the price. It's an incredible game that's incredibly vast and large. It's a good value. But I understand how some people may feel differently, so I get it. Otherwise, visually, performance-wise, content-wise, story-wise, feeling samey. None of these things are issues. Tears of the Kingdom is a good game, and these sites aren't making up these review scores. These are people's opinions. And the reality of the situation is that Tears of the Kingdom is one of the best games ever made. That's just the situation. It's not some sort of weird conspiracy. It's not Nintendo buying other sites out. It's a good game. One of the best development teams in history spent over half a decade trying to make one of their greatest successes an even greater evolution, something even better than before, and they succeeded. That's what happened. But anyways, everyone, those are just some of these review scores that I think are kind of ridiculous. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andres Restart, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.